What's up, guys? Jay back again with Eastern Shore Talk Around Town, and we've got Brandon. And Brandon, real quick, rapid fire questions. Question number one: what does self care mean to you?
Self-care means to me the overall well-being of yourself, as far as the mental, emotional, and physical aspect.
And what's one thing you like to do consistently for self care?
Currently listening to music and listening to podcasts or watching podcasts.
And what's one thing, movies, TV, streaming wise, that you've been watching that you enjoy lately?
Movie, TV. It's funny you say that. Been watching The Pivot. It's a podcast that they air on YouTube. Really good. Very relatable. So I enjoy watching that.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us, Brandon, and catch us next time on Eastern Shore Talk Around Town. Take care, guys. Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to Eastern Shore Talk Podcast, your podcast for all things self care and movies. We are on episode 33, and if this is your first time tuning in, welcome. We're glad to have you. I'm Jay Watson,
I'm Kathy Castle.
and we're fortunate enough to have Chris Morg join us again. Sorry, Chris. You're used to having a three-way intro on yours. We had Chris a couple weeks ago, and we had some technological compatibility issues. So Chris is gracious enough to return and come back and talk to us again. So welcome back, Chris. We're glad to have you back.
Thank you. I'm happy to be
Class,
here.
I have to say class 85.
We are.
I saw one of our classmates on the street today. Donnie Skinner. No, Donnie Skinner.
Oh yeah,
Policeman or something now, or
Retired Mr. Skinner, and he's working as a bailiff in his second version of himself.
there
He's
you
looking
go.
good.
He's double dipping. Yeah.
Double dipping. He's looking good.
So what we want to do is we want to grab Chris for a little bit and get into some fun, entertaining, hopefully informative, kind of behind the scenes Hollywood stuff, movies, streaming, the whole nine yards. But what I want to do, Chris, for the first few minutes is kind of pick up on one of the topics we talked about last time you were with us, and that's kind of the concept of mental health in the entertainment world and kind of public figures and how they deal with mental health. And it kind of was brought to mind, unfortunately, by the tragic passing of Liam Payne. And it kind of made me think of not only our conversation before, but an article that you sent me about the difficulties that the UK film and TV workers were having with mental health. So I kind of got a two-pronged question to start off with. And the first part is, and Kathy Marty and I talked about this at the event in Oxford this past weekend. While for most of us who are not in the public eye, at least to me, kind of the healthy goal is to get to a strong enough sense of self where the opinions of perfect strangers don't really matter to us. We're not hooked on that. And I can imagine, and Chris, you've got a unique perspective on this. I can imagine as someone, an actor, an actress, or musician who is in the public eye, who in no small part is dependent on the acceptance of strangers, either of them or their craft, to become successful. What has been your experience with having seen, or how do folks like that handle that? A, in the social media world, and B, are there mental health resources on movie sets?
well, those are great questions, Jay. And what I'd say is it's all evolving. Mental health has become, sort of something people are a little more focused on nowadays than they were in the past. To sort of, you know, pull up your bootstraps and handle it is a little less popular as a theory now. But
Yeah,
um, honestly, there are not great resources, and unfortunately, and this is probably true of capitalistic societies everywhere. There's also a lot of sort of con men and people that say they're doing stuff who really don't know, who can charge a lot of money, and
Mm.
people who have a lot of money, aren't the most sort of disciplined about whether they actually got help or not. There's a rehab I know where people go. It's in Malibu. It's beautiful. It's on the beach. Costs $10,000 a day.
Wow.
Well, they're in a really much better position. They have no incentive, if you understand economics, to tell somebody that they're feeling better, that they can leave, right? Because you got to have somebody else will pay you $10,000,
Yeah.
right? And it's, and if you were the best resort in the world, they couldn't charge you $10,000 a day, right? So they got to add the mental health thing to it. So there's a lot of that. But the biggest thing is that nobody can really explain to you what happens with fame and with recognizability unless you've actually experienced it, because it can be really scary. And somebody said to me once, I thought I was really smart. He said, look, once you become famous, you live in a world where there are a lot of people out there who have created their own relationship with you in their head, and they've never met you. And they expect you to behave the way they've created in their head to you. And a lot of times that's based on a character. So, you're not, Matt Damon's not Jason Bourne, Tom Cruise is not Ethan Hunt.
Yeah.
Right? And people might look at that. It happens much more in television because there is some psychological research that's been done that, you're in your own living room wearing your underwear or laying in your bed and you watch somebody pretty regular, that person somehow goes in a place in your bed that you're comfortable with them, them, when really it's just a character, right? This is name dropping. I don't know if this is something you like on your show or not, but I'm not trying to, it's just something I've noticed. In my neighborhood, Ted Danson lives, and he's the guy who played Sam on Cheers.
Yeah.
He's been in a bunch of other shows. And when he walks around with his dog or walks around the neighborhood, we live in a little subdivision out on the west side of LA, people will always say hi to him. And damn well they don't know who he is, and they don't know, what his situation is. In that neighborhood, and again, I'm not trying to say I live in some special neighborhood. It's a nice neighborhood, but it's not Beverly Hills or whatever. It's not behind a gate. Jamie Lee Curtis also lives in our neighborhood. And very few people say hi to her because she's in movies and movie stuff. And, weirdly, they're both wildly approachable. I don't know either of them very well. I know them to nod that we live in the same neighborhood and whatever. But the point is, people create these psychological attachments to these things. It used to happen to my wife and I all the time. We'd go to a party and you'd walk in and be like, wow, I know all these people. That's weird. I've never been to this neighborhood. I don't know the people throwing this party that well. And then you look around and you give yourself a moment, you realize, nope, these are the people that are in the commercials I see 55 fucking times a day.
Yeah.
Or these are the people I watch their TV show. And they're not big enough stars that you immediately, like Tom Cruise there, you'd be like, that's Tom Cruise. Right?
Yeah.
You see the guy who plays the gay son on, Modern Family. You don't immediately remember that because it's been canceled for a little while. And you're like, how do I know that guy? And when you get to be my age, you're like, could be high school, could be college, could be early in my life, could be a friend of my wife's. I don't know. Could have been a parent in one of my kids' schools. So you're just banging through your head. But weirdly, every person I just mentioned, I had a real interaction with, right? The person I watched on TV, I didn't. And so that's a weird dynamic to live in a world where that happens. And if and that's why there's stalkers. That's why there's craziness. That's why people have security. That's why that stuff happens. So there's a thing about fame and that kind of success. I think we do it in our country to rich people. So like, you're the daughter of Aaron or whatever. People know who you are, and that's got to suck. And what it is that you can just never trust any of the relationships. I think part of the reason I'm on your podcast, not anybody else's, is I went to high school with you guys.
Yeah.
But Jay, we were on probably a Little League team or some shit 20 years ago, right? Like, so maybe you got together and had a meeting and said, oh, our friend had a small amount of success in Hollywood. We're going to make a lot of money off that guy. But I don't think that's why I'm on this podcast, right?
Believe me, it's not paying the bills.
No.
Not paying anything.
Well, I feel more comfortable coming here, and it's why you see a lot of guys. Well, LeBron James's two partners are friends of his from high school because he
Yeah.
probably doesn't trust too many fucking people to
Yeah.
come up now, right?
Yeah.
And that can really affect your mental health when you don't trust anyone who comes around you, right? And that I think is problematic if you win the lottery. You know, nobody writes stories about how great it is to win the lottery. Most of the stories are it fucks you up somehow.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
and so that's why I would just say it's a really weird thing. I had it personally when I was on this show called Project Greenlight, where you do sort of get drunk with the people just give you shit. Like half the time, I would think what I was getting was illegal. Like one time I went to an airport and the lady behind the counter was like, I love Project Greenlight. I love you. I love watching you. I love it. Whatever. I'm going to put you in first class. Now, I don't think any airline actually has a system where the person at the gate is allowed to put you in first class, because if they did, every asshole on earth would be trying to get.
Yeah. Slipping them something under the table. Yeah.
Mysteriously, I was in first class, right? Like, you know, and it's little stuff, you know, boxes of clothes will show up and they hope you wear it. And, you know, restaurants mysteriously, and you get used to that. You're like, don't you know who I am? What the thing? You know, I had a time, one of my sons keeps a picture of it. The people that run Rolls Royce and Bentley in Beverly Hills, one of the owners of the dealership loved Project Greenlight. One day just called me up and said, you want to drive around in a Rolls Royce? I'm going to give you this convertible Rolls Royce. You can drive around for a week. Literally, I would drive places just to drive the car. Like, it was like, I don't, and my kids all want to be driven to school in it, and they do whatever. And you're like, this is crazy. This is like a $400,000 car that I'm just driving around because the guy liked watching me on TV, right? And now maybe he thought somebody was going to buy one because I was driving it, but not in my circles. There's no one who's buying a $400,000 car.
Yeah.
But so then you start thinking, well, is this why people are buying movies from me? Is this why people are working with me? Is because I'm pseudo famous. And so you get people, and then when you see it in a big scale, like Matt Damon or Ben Affleck, or you see it on a, you know, even the guys from American Pie or whatever, you realize it's hard. It's hard to deal with, you know, and your values somewhat change, and your things. And again, it's not all bad. Some of it's positive, and a lot of people learn over time how to use their fame to help people, you know,
Yeah.
and to raise money, and to, you know, Matt's done a ton for, you know, clean water around the world, you know, and a number of other things. And so I think there's no way to describe it. And Kathy was talking earlier about EMTs and first responders and police and, you know, war veterans. I don't think you really can understand. I have never walked down the street wondering if anyone's going to shoot me today. Now, maybe there's places in Los Angeles I could have that same experience.
Maybe you should be worried about that.
But I don't know what that's like day in and day out.
Yeah.
To be there carrying a gun in a war, right? I don't know what it's like to roll up on a fucking wife who just got so beat by her husband that you can't even recognize her face, and you just got to go home and watch your kid's t-ball game and pretend nothing happened. Like, I don't know how a brain does that. I joke sometimes that I picked this career because I can't handle it. I was like, no one dies if I fuck up. Maybe a movie sucks, but most likely somebody else fixed it, right? And nobody, right? My only real concern is making sure my kids are okay, right? And that's a relief for me, because if I was like, that's why I'm so impressed by what Kathy and Marty do and things where you're every day
It's
you're
a lot.
dealing with life and death and with health and you know, we had a young well, he's younger than I am, but he's a son of one of the families in my neighborhood who I've known for a while, and I played tennis with his mom, has schizophrenia, and he was in a residence, and he was taking his medicine. About 6 weeks ago, he left because in California schizophrenia is not lock-upable. If you try to help him, you try to give him the medication, but he didn't want to take his medication.
That is accurate everywhere. That's accurate here.
Yeah, so, and he left.
It's our basic right. It's their right.
Yeah, and he left, and he was living at friends' houses and doing whatever. He's probably, I think he was like 32. And another woman who's friends of the family is also in this little, it's like a little live ball, old people tennis across, at this park. But it's nothing fancy, but she had seen him at the beach playing volleyball. And he'd said hello and he seemed fine. And she was sort of surprised. He was, out and sort of on his own at the beach. And I do live near the beach and they do play beach volleyball there. So I am in Southern California. But the story is about a week later, right? He attacked a bunch of people in the park. And one older person got very badly beaten. And the kid's in jail now. I mean, again, I say kid, he's 32 years old. He's in jail. No one has any doubt, even the guy who got beaten, that it was because he was off his meds and he was having an episode or doing
He was
whatever.
hearing voices.
And
Yeah.
and whatever. And, so now at tennis this past week, that's why it's fresh in my mind. The mom and the friend were there and we were talking about it and she was just so embarrassed. And I said, you got nothing to be embarrassed about. And she said, I'm so helpless. I don't, he's 32. He's allowed to do what he wants, and the guy he beat up, was an older man in the town that we all knew. And it was sort of, this little subdivision. And you look at that and you say, that had nothing to do with fame, had nothing to do with anything else. But that's an indicator of mental health. We still haven't quite figured out how to handle it. And as soon as it becomes dangerous to, average citizens, we get really harsh, which probably isn't the best way. Like him in jail isn't good either, except they'll make him take his meds or whatever. But
That's such a common. Listen. You should give that tennis mom my phone number. I'd be glad to talk to her about many situations that we've seen like that. And these poor parents feel a lot of guilt and a lot of shame. And they're adults, and people have a right to do what they want. The sad thing is, this story is over and over and over again. And it's not that people that have schizophrenia are dangerous, because really, usually they are not. The media will sometimes make that seem like they're dangerous, but really, he probably had a bit of an episode, like you said, and I've seen it right in front of our pub here before. The pub, Chris. And one of our clients was not doing well, talking to himself, and got into an altercation with an older guy. It's a very similar situation. He ends up in jail. And really, that wasn't the place for him. But, you can understand, wow, I mean, this guy attacked this elderly, vulnerable person. But, it's just so misunderstood. And now we've gone from locking people up for 20 years, so we can't get people the help they need. So it's gone the other way. But that's extreme mental health right there. But it's tough. It's tough.
Well, Jay,
So-
you asked me about the guy from One Direction. Obviously, I don't know him. I thought that thing was a joke, to be honest. But it seems like some people like him. But the thing that's really interesting, and I only read the stuff that came over social media. There's
Right.
paragraphs, whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know, but suicide is prevalent right now. There's a big high school here in town where 4 kids have killed themselves in 8 months, and nobody can really figure out what's going on. And these are relatively privileged. And one of the things that I've seen in this mental health sphere that I try really hard with people I get around as an older person now, a little more experienced, is say to them, look, when you start having problems, which you will, right? Because this whole thing happens. Like, I think Tom Cruise is awesome. I love watching Tom Cruise. I think Tom Cruise literally has been a movie star my entire life.
Yeah.
From Risky Business to Mission Impossible. I love Jack Reacher. And he does these
The
other
Olympics.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's not surprising to me he is a big believer in something like Scientology. Because if you go home every day and you're Tom Cruise, weird shit happens. You say to yourself, why me? There were 30 other actors that auditioned for this. There were 50 other people that wanted to be Ethan Hunt. There's a whole bunch of people he came up with, right, who aren't still movie stars, right?
Yeah.
And so you can get into this whole thing in your head about, I must be special, or there must be a reason, or it can't just be luck, or it can't be I just have talent, right? It can't. And I don't know how he deals with it. I don't know Tom Cruise at all. But my point is, I love Tom Cruise movies. I will go see Tom Cruise movies, and I live in the fucking business, right? I do find Scientology, when you really learn about it, a hard thing to understand.
Yes.
I don't quite see how this is helping the people that it's helping. On the flip side, I can't imagine what it's like to be Tom Cruise, right? And I think that
I agree.
stuff, I think, what'll happen to Taylor Swift when she doesn't sell out a stadium somewhere? How does she feel? I remember Michael Jackson, toward the end of his life, wrote a book about maybe being a prophet for God. Like, he had gone all the way to the place that he's some sort of divine being because people like the way he danced. And the point is, it's really hard, right? Like, it's hard to justify all that. Now, you guys and me and our friends and people probably are spending all their time trying to figure out why the bad shit happened to them.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're like, why did this happen? Why did that happen? Why am I schizophrenic? Imagine what it's like when you go home to your $50 million house and your $20 million car, your supermodel actress wife, Nicole Kidman or Katie Holmes or whoever, and you go in the room and you're like, why? What the fuck? Right? And then you have all this list of questions. Now, everyone is coming at you. Can you give money to this? Can you do this? Can you do my movie? Can you read my script? Can you just come to this charity dinner? Can you do, and it's over fucking whelming, right? Everybody wants a piece. And the problem is asking for mental health, to your point, your second part of the question was, are there services? It's really hard to create mental health services for the people who are struggling with success. And I think you see it now. Apparently we have more billionaires now in the world than we ever had. I think you see it those people have enough money that they can make anyone's dream come alive. You want to open a restaurant, you want to buy a thing, you want to build a channel marker hospital, Talbot County. There are people out in the world who could walk up and go, that's a good idea, Kathy, let's do that. Bang, it exists. Right?
They're not doing that, just saying.
Yeah.
They're not here in Talbot County.
They haven't found me yet. I'm not famous yet.
But that's the problem with having that much money or that much stuff, is you become a target for everybody. So again, you lose any faith in the regular thing. And then when you try to explain some reason, I go through it sometimes. Why did I read Good Will Hunting before somebody else did?
Yeah.
Why did we get along, Matt Ben and I, so well? Why did my friend from college call me about American Pie? He could have called 75 other fucking producers, right? Like, it's not, and they all worked out. And is there some secret sauce I have that I read those scripts and realized how good they were? And how do I bottle that up and make more money? And I have more money than I ever thought I'd ever have. And I'm not trying to brag, but I'm just saying, you sit down and you say, it's because I had success doing what I love to do, right? Whereas, and I'm sure that's what an actor, a musician, an athlete, even a real estate developer who's like design would say is, I love doing this. Somehow I'm getting paid to do something I love to do, right? But then you wake up, it does carry a certain amount of obligation, and it carries a certain target with it. And none of it is secret. Those people who die and somebody said they had $40 million in the bank and you thought they were broke. That doesn't happen much anymore, And so anyway, I guess what I'd say is no one has figured that out. There's a lot of therapists. There's a couple programs that for the right amount of money and time, they'll help you with some of that stuff. A big movie star from the 70s and 80s. I might have told this story in the last one, so if I did, because I find it a good story for this exact topic. Sitting at a table with Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, me, Robin Williams, and who's a friend of Robin's, and they had just won the Oscar. This was Oscar night. There's all these big parties you hear about, and it's true. You can ride around and go to these big parties. There's more famous people out than you can imagine. And we're sitting at this table, and we're a little drunk and can't believe it. And those two are everyone's favorite fucking party guests at that point because they're the new guys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Of course, they know I'm the bouncer just walking around with them. But we sit down with this guy and he says, give everybody 2 years. And Matt turns to him and says, what are you talking about? He said, I'm just telling you, everybody in your life, everyone, your brothers, your sisters, your mother, your girlfriend, your high school friends, people you work with, people you used to live with, the guy who lives on your couch, everyone is going to treat you different.
Wow.
And they're going to treat you different for the next 2 years. And you need, over the 2 years, to figure out what your response to all that is.
Wow.
And some people will go with I don't know if you saw Al Pacino wrote this book, and it's all in the press right now. And he talks about how he lost $50 million. And one of his comments was, I was paying for a landscaper at someone's house, and he was making $50,000 a year, and I didn't even live in the house, right? And then he said, I'm paying 18 people's cell phone. And he said, you can't say no, and because it's weird. You're afraid that if you say no to too many people, somehow that magic you got to be Al Pacino
Right.
go away. So, but then you wake up and like you don't have you've given all your money away because you know whatever. And I had another friend who became famous through television, and one day we were out and he said, "Got to figure out how to say no." And I said, "Dude, saying no is fucking hard because in the old days when you were broke, you just say I don't have the money." Now they can go online and look how much money you have. And even if that person's off by 20%, still more money than you need, right? So what are you going to say if you can't say, I just don't have the money? I just decided not to pay for you to get a new roof on your house. Well, nobody really likes that, right? And he admitted to me that he was paying for 8 kids to go to college, and none of his kids were old enough to be in college yet.
Oh my God.
And I said, who are they related to at least? Some related. Some of the kids are my nanny. Some of the kids are my mom's best friend. Like,
wow.
Because they think you just have all this money and sitting there gathering dust in your garage. And they're like, well, what are you going to spend it on? Might as well pay for Jimmy to go to college. That conversation doesn't happen to a lot of people. I'd be willing to bet in Talbot County, it's very few, although there are some super rich people there.
Uh-huh.
But you become a movie star, it's amazing how many people think you should pay for their kid to go to college.
Yeah, but think of family members too. It happens in families. Like, you buy something, you buy a boat or you take a trip or whatever. And then a family member that has had some rougher times, they look at you and they think maybe you got some extra. It is hard. That's a very low scale of what you're talking about. But, I don't think people realize that, here's $100 or here's $1 million. But, what your expenses or how you live your life may, be reflective of the money you have. So it doesn't mean that you just have everything to give away unless maybe you are a billionaire. But yeah. And when do you say that?
My friend used to say, he said, there's always more shit to spend your money on.
That's true, right?
You never run out of shit to spend your money on. And as life goes on, you maybe end up in a divorce, or you have a kid who has special needs, or you actually aren't as cool as you were 3 years ago.
But you still have these expenses.
And you're none of these, and I mean this again, and they're totally innocent victims, but a lot of people in Hollywood become successful when they're 25 or younger. And I'm sure you guys can say that is not the best time in the world to be making financial decisions.
Absolutely.
Definitely not a time. And a lot of people who are in your life who are supposedly to help you
are taking advantage of you.
Are taking a piece. Yeah. So they're even if they think they're doing the right thing, they're still taking a piece. So the number one job, which would be the person that says no for you, right? They don't want to do because then somebody gets mad or they do it wrong, they get fired. Right. So there's a phrase that goes around a lot. It's like, well, are you in a meeting with a bunch of people afraid to get fired? Or are you in a meeting with a bunch of people who want to make a good movie? And it changes what the meeting is 100%. You know, and I think that is true in a lot of businesses. But in this case, just many conversations are about something happening versus something not happening.
Yeah.
I love that you bring up trust. I mean, that seems so simple, but it's nothing I ever thought about. You're right. Like, I mean, who do people trust then? I never really thought about it. Like, who do they have? I think there's a lot of people that could put on a facade that they're in their best interest, rather they're taking care of something of them or trying to get them better business. What's your next movie or whatever? Who do you trust? I never really thought about that. And that must be a really bad feeling. Like, I know I have 1 million people I can trust that, I'm not that important that anybody's going to take that kind of advantage of me. And I take that for granted,
So let's
But I do want to say one thing to Chris, and I have known him a long time as a friend. I mean, I consider us to be pretty decent friends. At least I'm my view of it, my perception.
I agree.
And no, I remember when you started to. I remember you and I having some funny stories, like in a McDonald's in Salisbury, but I won't tell that story before you had faith. But anyway, when you started to change, I mean, I didn't really look at you any different. I mean, it's still Chris, whatever. I guess you got some different friends now. Maybe, hopefully, you won't lose your old friends, and you never did. The thing about you, I will honestly say to you, I just don't think you ever change. You'll still show up at a party and Chris got like some crazy shorts on. I got paint on him and a ripped t-shirt. I mean, he didn't look like he rolled in from, the Billionaires Club or, he's cussing like a bandit or whatever. And I mean, he's just the same old Chris. I think you are.
Well, look, I think part of it, and I say this all the time, is I grew up there. I grew up with good friends and people who,
and they care about you.
They care about me, but also I mean, it is a real thing to say that there are values, there are principles in the world. And I think you learn them and you test them out growing up on which ones you want. And I think that there were a few that were really important. Loyalty is one of them. Being honest is one of them.
Yes.
And some people say this is a small town thing. Maybe it's a more southern, mid-Atlantic thing. It's like, and don't get too big for your fucking britches.
Yeah.
Right?
Where you came from.
Where you come from, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I say all the time. I spoke at USC a couple of weeks ago, and I said to them, "Look, my secret sauce, if there was such a thing with scripts, was I grew up watching movies in Easton, Maryland, and so when I read a script, I compare it to the shit I like going to see. Like, I wish I had the time Jay has to go every Friday night to the movies. The point is, like, that's there. And I got a little lost. I mean, look, I'm sober. I'm in AA. I lost some sense, and it overwhelmed me a little bit. But I give Talbot County and Easton and my core group of friends, of which, Kathy, I would definitely say you are one, some credit in sort of living with that crazy shit, but then also being willing to talk about it. And if you don't have that in your life, and this is the hardest thing about Hollywood, because in probably any creative place, if you go to Nashville for music, if you go, is that a lot of the people that have nothing keeping them at home that end up in that town to try to do it don't have those things. Right. I ended up there sort of by accident, and I did not have a great relationship with my parents, right? And I can probably talk more about it now because they're both dead. But the point is that, so me leaving was more about getting 3,000 miles between me and my family, right? And not my sisters, but really just my parents, right? So I went to LA. Then it worked out, right? I think every day I thought, well, this will be the day it's not working out, and I'll go back east. Right? And I'm still here. But the point is that all of that combined to help find your way back to being grounded, right? There isn't a ton of stuff in Hollywood, and maybe this is true in music and sports, whatever, but there's not a ton of stuff that you win for being grounded, because it's a little bit of a delusional world. If you're the person who starts yelling, "The emperor is naked," and the person next to you is saying the emperor has really cool new clothes, they just happen to look like a naked body. It's hard to be the one who's always yelling the emperor's clothes are not there, because the other person is in a world where the emperor needs to have those clothes, and they don't want to be the person who says, so like in the situation I've been in where bad behaviors happened, in the situation I've been in where I've been asked to cover money situations that are not cool, I haven't done it, and I've lost some business because of that. I'm not trying to make myself sound cool, and I got
it's your value alignment, it's your values again
situations, but I couldn't get all the way there to just blatantly take advantage of people. And it is a business that has a real strong center on this is all leverage, right? I have a term for it. It's probably totally wrong, but I call them poker players. And what I say is when you decide you're going to go play poker and you get in your car and you're driving to wherever it's going to be, you're excited about going to take your friend's money. And you're excited to go there and bluff them and lie to them and take their money. And you feel like you're a winner because you left with the pot, even though the pot came out of your friend's pocket. Now, if you go to Vegas, obviously it's more the house and whatever.
Yeah.
But the point is, you have a mentality that is, we're all sitting at this table, and what's honest about it is you're trying to take my money. So you're trying to take my money, I'm trying to take your money, and we're going to play this game. I suck at that. I have a story where years ago I was at a poker table and my father was there who loved playing poker, some other young people. And 4 hands in, my dad says, "Chris, you got to stop playing." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because I just can't sit here and watch everybody take your money." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, you clearly are just putting the money in and you're staying in hands you're never going to win because you just like being at the table with us, right? But it's not that fun for the rest of us because we're just taking your money." And
Oh my
I'm
gosh.
your dad, these other guys, I don't know about them. He was making a joke. Like they're happy to take your money. Me, I feel bad. But the point was, I'd rather play and make hit movies and have a good time. And I don't really want to take my friends' money. I want everybody to get what they deserve and what's fair. And if we have a hit, we split the money. But that's just not 100% the way it works. And I have to accept some of that. And there's an old phrase that pops in my head sometimes. And now I'm giving you my own personal view. But the point is that in the mental health area of, there's that phrase that says, "Don't blame the player, blame the game."
Right.
I will say that I definitely spent chunks of my career trying to change the game so that I could play it a different way. And I'll say I lost that battle. And part of what I go through is, and why did I ever think I could change the game? Game's been here for 100 years, right?
Yeah.
The idea of leverage, I mean, I'm sure it's been here a lot longer. I'm sure when Shakespeare was out there trying to say, "Hey, will you put my play in your theater?" I'm sure some people were getting ripped off, and there were some actresses who were doing some shit they shouldn't have, and actors.
All of the above.
Right. Like the point is, that's been the game since anyone had leverage.
Yeah.
Right?
True.
And so I realized, and I spend time in my therapy talking about how can I live in a world that's all about leverage when leverage itself makes me uncomfortable. I feel horrible when somebody implants their leverage on me because I want to punch them in the face, which is inappropriate. But then I'm at a certain point where there's a few people that I can have leverage on, and people would expect me to use that leverage. So I overcompensate by never using that leverage, which then makes me less valuable to the project or to people. So I'm constantly in battle of what's appropriate leverage use and what's not appropriate leverage use. People who don't have that concern are very easily firing through the business, and people who don't want to be in the leverage game at all, right? The people I call non-poker players, right? They don't want to stay. They don't stay, right? Or they go work for somebody who deals with the leverage, and they just do the job, and they don't have to play the leverage.
So let's switch gears a little bit, Chris, and I'm really curious about this whole, and you've talked about this a lot on your podcast. I'm really curious about the whole movies and streaming dynamic, and my question is, because to me, streaming has become what DVDs and VHS tapes used to be. It was kind of like that back end inflow of money for a studio or whatever. And of course, you could speak much more to that than I could. But like, how does the process work? You put out a movie and it's kind of run its course in the theaters. Do the streaming services then bid to have that month or two of exclusivity on that movie, or how does that work when that end is kind of figured out?
Well, it's a great question, and the actual answer is, and why we talked about it so much on our podcast, was that the business hasn't figured it out yet. And to your point, the big thing that changed was the place that I'm with you would agree was the second, here we call it the second window, right? DVD, you see it at home, sometimes on HBO, whatever. started making original content. So the day Netflix, which you would consider the DVD company, and they were a DVD
Yep.
mailing company, right? The day they decided to make high-end stuff, the first thing was this show called House of Cards, right? They changed the entire dynamic, because now the person that owns all of that back end stuff, that other money, the DVD money, the foreign sales money, all of it, also owns the front end, right? So that was the big change. Like HBO made a lot of great original content. Sopranos. There's this little documentary show called Project Greenlight they did. That was pretty cool. They did Sex and the City, other stuff. But the point is that they were on TV. So if you were a movie studio, you didn't feel like they were competing against you, right? If you were CBS, it was a different kind of show because it could be R-rated and it didn't have ads, right? They were the only ones, and that's, in my opinion, why they became so popular, because they were the only ones making first-run R-rated, no-ad content for the home, right? Now, you're great, Jay, because you go to the theater every Friday. But the truth of the matter is, there aren't a lot of Jays out there.
No.
It is nicer to watch at home a lot of times.
Right.
Yeah.
It is more convenient. The other thing that changed is they went subscription. Not even Blockbuster back in the day of DVD was subscription,
Blockbuster.
right?
Yeah.
Blockbuster was the biggest DVD in the world, and they never went to you pay $15 a month and you can come take any DVD you want off the shelf, right? That's what Netflix is, you know? And so that changes a lot too when there's no extra money, because more people liked your movie versus the other person's movie, right? So what they call here is that's the hit-driven model. And so in my life, I benefited and have a house and my kids are going to college because I made hits. People liked the American Pie movie. People paid more. I got a little piece of that. People liked Good Will Hunting. People liked some of the other stuff. Now, today, there's not a lot of that. So what I'd say is you have just hit on the biggest problem in the business now, because, and a lot of people are starting to write about it now, which is, you said it's sort of like, it's the home video DVD, but really what it's becoming is the TV, right? And basically Netflix is CBS, right? And it just has a lot more, but it's also CBS plus the DVD, right?
Yeah.
Because it's in your home. But then they also don't charge you per title, which is what CBS would do. CBS didn't charge you. You had to watch ads if you wanted to watch one of their shows. I love NCIS. I loved it more when Mark Harmon was on it. It's a CBS show. I was a huge fan of the original CSI, CBS. Yep. The point is, I didn't have to ever pay to watch CSI, right? Because I knew there were ads. And so it's more of a back-end business problem that is moving up to the creative side, because if you end up in that situation where you have they don't really care. They just need to have enough. Netflix doesn't actually want things to be hits. They'll never say that out loud. But if Max and Prime and Paramount Plus and Apple Plus all have hits, right? And Netflix doesn't, that fucks with them, right? So the best way to fight that, because you're never going to be the one place that has all the hits, right? So what you want is there to be no concept of hits. Nobody knows what a hit is. Just like I'm sure if you're making shitty food, this whole food revolution we went through, you just didn't want anybody to care what the ingredients were. You didn't want to have to fight out what was a good ingredient, what was a bad ingredient, because you were always going to have something you made, if you're making Doritos, that probably has no ingredients in it, right? That are actually organic. But that's where we're at right now, which is why I hear people saying I can't find anything new I like. I can't, because the bar is so low. Again, humans are humans. They work harder, in my personal view, in an arena where they can have some success. And it's why people talk about corporate jobs, or they talk about burnout, or if you're doing the same thing every day with no a chance at change, no chance of advance. It gets to you. I'm sure that's why some people go to therapy, and some of these writers, directors, actors are like, oh, okay, I'll just do this because I need to get a paycheck and my kid wants to go to a private school. And I don't know that it's that good, but it's the best thing on my desk right now. So it was a long answer to your question, but the point is that that's a big problem, is the loss of the hit-driven model, which comes through subscriptions. But those subscriptions now also have to do with the sort of second and third window companies are now making the first window. So there's no sale, right?
Yeah.
There's no money that changes hands when you go from the theater to the DVD.
So how does a whatever movie, you'll notice it will land on, for example, Hulu for a month, just Hulu exclusively. How does Hulu get that 1 or 2 month exclusive window?
They pay.
Okay,
Or they made it, right?
Right.
The problem is that exclusivity has not actually proven that good.
Now,
We're all smart enough to know that there's no more of a time connection to the stories you're watching, right? You're not going to go in the office tomorrow and someone's going to say, hey, did you see the new episode of MASH? And you're going to have to say no, right? Because no one's doing it. They're not even doing it on shit like the new Game of Thrones or the new Lord of the Rings. You might have friends on social media who are watching it.
Right.
But you're not only having, they used to call it water cooler talk, right? You're not having any random conversations about content, right? And that was a very socially motivating thing. People talk about, hit show, got 8 million people to watch it. When Cosby and Roseanne, was on, and NBC had that must-see TV with, Seinfeld, and they were averaging 40 million people a night at the exact same time.
Back when there was nothing else to do but watch TV.
Have this.
Yeah.
In their
So
veins.
Chris,
Kathy's holding up her smartphone for people who are not watching this, and she's right.
Oh, yeah.
Smartphone's a big change.
let me ask you this, Chris. I think I've noticed this, but let me ask you this: Are some of the streaming services now attaching themselves to these projects from the get-go, in whatever fashion, to kind of in lieu of, or maybe as part of having exclusivity to that event that they are predicting is going to be some big thing for them?
Yes, and I think the word you just used, event, is the key word, which is the one thing that is still working on getting 30 million or 20 million or whatever is events, right? So some of them are these live events, the Oscars, or, recently it's also sporting events, right? People are bidding ridiculous amount of money for the NBA. And, now the WNBA and the women's college basketball tournament had more people watching it than almost any other thing on the planet, right? And part of that is because it's an event. The event programming and the fear of missing an event is what they have determined. And I've never gotten anyone to publicly admit this, but I've heard it from people who work at, these places, is it's the only thing that scares somebody from dropping a subscription. So like right now, one of the big problems is everybody keeps watching the show they like and then canceling.
Yeah.
And the government just passed a law that says all these streamers have to make canceling as easy as signing up. And now it like takes forever to find the button where you can cancel your account. It takes forever to get to it. And they tell you it's going to be 14 days before we acknowledge that you canceled your account and blah, blah, blah. They passed a law. I don't think it comes into effect till January or whatever, but the cancel my subscription button has to be as easy as the I would like to subscribe, right? And they have to be when one of those, like you'll see most every service has a free trial, right?
Yep.
So you have the show you like, will you really watch all the episodes, or will you really watch the movie in the 7 days? Maybe, maybe not, but are you really going to go back and then cancel it?
No.
And they had the 7 days to market.
Or you forget, yep.
Right? So now you're like, okay, I'll hold on to it. So now you start paying, then you get that one show, and you're like, okay, fuck it, I'll keep it.
Or the one sporting event, like, oh, we can't. You got to have Apple TV to watch that.
Yeah. And
That night.
and so the world's going to divide up like it did when we had national TV networks, but it's probably only going to divide up that much. It's probably only going to be 4,
Right.
and the rest of them are all going to be cable channels, which didn't have anywhere near the same amount of
Right.
viewers. And they'll probably bundle them. I mean, Disney right now is pushing their bundle.
Yeah.
Right.
Disney Plus, Hulu, and Max, right?
Right.
The average person is going to say, why the fuck would Max want to be part? Because Disney Plus, particularly because there's a bundle inside Disney Plus too, where you can get ESPN and Hulu and
ESPN.
Disney Plus.
Hulu.
Why would they do it? Disney Plus is doing it because it's all about getting our information. It's about getting your credit card. It's about so they can send you more shit. So Max is realizing they'll get more people's emails by doing it through the bundle with Disney than they are doing it themselves, right? And if you go on Amazon, pretty much you can get every channel on Amazon now except Disney Plus and Netflix, right? You go on Apple TV, not Apple TV Plus, you can even get Netflix, right? Because they don't care, because Apple's so low compared to Netflix. Netflix, I think, is 283 million. Apple just barely passed 50 million, right? So they're like, fine, we'll be here because it doesn't matter. We're not even in the same game, and that's what's going to happen is you're going to get, there's probably going to be 3, maybe 5 bundles, and you as a family will decide, right? And you'll go on just like it used to be a channel menu. Now it's your apps show up.
Yeah.
And you pick which app you're going to watch, and then you see, and then if you're bored or that doesn't have what you want, you hit the other app. And then there'll be a lot of fights about which app. And then when it's sporting events, you'll be trying to figure out which app has the fucking streaming. Like, because I can't remember, it's on TV on ESPN, so it should be on Disney Plus, but they sold the web rights to Max, so now I'm fucking got to find Max to watch Monday Night Football. Like, what?
Right.
And
But
you're
that will all work itself out to where it's easier for the audience to be loyal on TV, on their phone, on their, laptop.
Are there? This might be a kind of a big question, just kind of maybe a rhetorical question, but are there, in your opinion, Chris, are there types of projects that kind of Hollywood is missing, or maybe I'm not saying that'll save the movie industry from streaming, but just from a general fan standpoint to you, are there like types of projects that like maybe Hollywood's not promoting as much as they can, or maybe something that is missing?
I have a vested interest in this answer, but I will say that I believe it wholeheartedly, which is honestly the kind of movies I used to do are not getting their proper due right now. And the way I would describe them is something that is invented or introduced to the public
Something new.
Right? Through movies, right? You rarely see a new movie that isn't based on something else. Based on this book, based on this comic book, based on this video game, based on this thing. And that's because it makes sense. You went to business school, you're saying, okay, what gives me a higher percentage chance of this?
That's risk. Yeah.
I need people who already love it. Now, the truth of the matter is, loving a book doesn't mean you'll love what they did with the movie, right? And they're always different, but they give you a little hook where somebody might try it out, right? So there's that. The second thing is, most of these things we've talked about, Amazon, Apple, Disney, are literally some of the biggest companies in the world, right? I think that Amazon and Apple battle,
for number one,
biggest company in the world, right? So you have 2 things that happen when that's the people focusing on this business. One is the profit margin has to be a lot bigger, right? Like if you're Apple and you say, look, we're not going to wake up and turn on the Apple machine if we're just, we'll have the app store for the iPhone, but we're not going to make all these apps. Let all these other idiots make these apps. And, if they start making a lot of money or they turn out to be great, like what Meta always does, if they're WhatsApp, well, we'll just fucking buy WhatsApp.
Yeah.
Right? But we don't need to set it up, right? If they're Instagram, well, we'll just buy Instagram. So the problem is that all of these things that I did, nobody on the fence of it thought Good Will Hunting would make money. There were people who thought American Pie was porno. There's nobody, even Project Greenlight, even Adjustment Bureau, even, Joyride, all these fucking things, they're introduced to the world as a movie. They're costing, anywhere from 50 million down. And there's accountants or people who look at that and say $50 million on an original idea with potentially not quite as big talent. So the other thing you see, if you see something original, it has a giant name in it, right? And that's the way they justify that expense, right? They say, well, we got Channing Tatum and Scarlett Johansson do this movie about the fake mission to whatever.
They'll be the draw. Yeah.
So it's not that it's a real story, but people like Channing Tatum and Scarlett Johansson, right? Now, to me, that's a problem because A, you don't always know what the actor was thinking about when they said yes, right? But B, there are a lot of things people don't really care to see people doing, right? Channing Tatum, yeah, he could be an astronaut, but what I'm more interested in him is being Magic Mike. Right? Like, he's funnier. I love him in the British Secret Service thing, the Gentleman.
Oh yeah.
Gentleman, what the fuck is it? Anyway, with Colin.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about.
He's really funny in that as the American guy. But my point is that hasn't proven to actually be reliable as you put a big star in and people are going to pay to see it. And going off something that isn't Spider-Man hasn't proven either, right? And so what I'd say to you is we've lost a little bit of the Mavericks. We've lost a little bit of the people that have a little money, that do marketing, that do distribution, who just say, this is a good movie. I'm going to get people to come see it and the money will work out, right? You have a couple companies. Neon did well with this, Long Legs. They did well with something else. A24 has a hit here or there. But a lot of people think those two companies will end up getting bought by bigger companies because the cash flow, and again, now we're getting into deep accounting weeds, but at the end of the day, the cash flow of risking money on things nobody goes to see, and that's the biggest problem you have is now, I'm sure a couple of your Friday nights, if not more, you've been the only person in the theater.
Yep.
Or you and two other people.
Yep.
Right? Well, nobody can make a business off a 50-seat theater that only sells 2 seats.
Yep.
Even if your popcorn costs you $150, they're not going to make money, right? So that didn't exist when we were growing up. When did you ever go to a movie that was empty unless you went at 9 in the morning?
Yeah,
right?
it was so annoying.
Never, right? And that's because it was one, like you said, you didn't have a lot of choices. Today, there's so many choices. There's even choices to watch a movie. So if you're in the mood to watch a movie, you can just sit down in your nice chair and turn it on, you know? So there's a bunch of factors that have made sense if you look at the decision all by itself. The problem is nobody is looking at the giant ecosystem. So what Hollywood is missing is some of its own discipline. We make too much stuff. You know, Netflix just announced they're going to put out 120 new movies next year.
Yeah.
It just sounds dumb to say that, right? It's like if you know, McDonald's said, we're just going to make 1 billion more Big Macs because we think people will buy them. And then you're just going to see people behind McDonald's every night throwing away Big Macs.
Well, it's like cereal, right? It's like there's too many choices.
Yeah. And so that's what I think they're missing. And I have summed it up. And the reason I did the podcast, just to promote for myself, I'm doing a live event in Talbot County on November 22nd at the Oxford Community Center to talk about some of this stuff and sort of share some insights and hopefully make people laugh a couple times. But the point is that the reason I'm out talking to people about it is actually the audience has a lot of control. If people started behaving the same way over enough time, the problem is you're not going to do that just because you want to save the business or you want to keep a movie theater. People do it because it's what fits in their life now. Look, I love movies. I love going to a movie theater. I haven't been to a movie theater in 6 weeks, right? My life has changed. So let's accept that, right? So the other answer I'd say to you, Jay, is we should accept it, admit it, and we should be telling folks what is theater worthy.
Yeah.
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 Like if we just came right out and just said, look, yeah, we spent $180 million on this movie. The truth of the matter is I don't think anyone's buying a ticket. That's what Apple just did with that George Clooney, Brad Pitt movie.
And it went right to the stream.
They just said, fuck it, we don't think it's good enough. No one's going to buy a ticket. We're going straight to Apple. right?
Well, Kevin Costner pulled the plug on part 2 of Horizon because part 1 didn't do anything, so they didn't release it. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, Chris, you were talking about original content. You know what I was thinking, but maybe this is my false thinking, that the world got so crazy that people, because loneliness became an epidemic, right? Not just that you live alone in your home, but just that you feel alone in the world.
Yep.
So did Hollywood start making things that were familiar? I mean, like I'll admit it, man, I couldn't wait till the Guardians came out of the galaxy or the last Harry Potter. I want to go back and see my friends because it was familiar, and when Luke Skywalker came back, in The Mandalorian, I was like, that saved me from COVID, but did we use those familiar things to make us connect as people? Is that what we did? Because people are messed up. We messed up with society.
Absolutely. And you're trained in this, and both of you may know there's a term, I think it's called attachment, that a kid is supposed to have with their parents when they, particularly the mom, it's about touching them and maybe breastfeeding, whatever. I'm not getting into parenting. But the point is, they actually done the research that enough time spent, they think it's about only 5 or 6 times with a group of characters in your house, not only makes you more familiar, but you actually, some of the same chemicals in your brain fire as if they're your friends, even though they're not real people. So that the point,
Ted Lasso.
yeah, you're exactly, you're totally right. You end up having this attachment to characters that it sets off a little bit of a positive, reaction in your brain, right?
We're looking for one.
There is no doubt that a lot of these guys who use algorithms, who are trying to get a big enough audience to make the numbers work out, who are doing whatever, it's also why there's way more television series than there are movies, because in a television series, you have a chance to make them be attached. 6 episodes is more time, but it also has breaks. So you get that sense of, well, I really love them. I'm going to go back. Oh, I love them again. It's sort of like, your neighbor invites you to a party. You have a good time. You go to the next party. And by the third party, you're like, I like these neighbors. These are great neighbors. I'm glad they moved in my neighborhood. Right. And then you're friendly with them. Right. And so you'll see a lot of that where these guys are trying to create it. It's why, Outer Banks goes away. It comes back. #1 show in the world. Right. People love the Outer Banks. Right.
Yes, we do.
Yes. And my point is, part of it is because what's going to happen. Those characters.
They're familiar.
Yeah.
And we're missing that.
100%.
So how do you create the next what's going to be familiar and people want to go back? That's
Outer Banks was new when it started.
Yep.
I mean, so the point is, yes, a lot of people are trying to analyze it. The Ted Lasso situation. Is that because he's funny, Sudeikis? Is that because it's a great idea? Weirdly, soccer.
We need Ted.
Well, but again, also the Wrexham show took off. Right?
Yeah.
And that's 2 guys owning a reality. They actually own a soccer.
Yeah, it's Ryan Reynolds' team. Yeah.
But that show is working. So was it soccer? Did people like that? Is it famous people? Who the fuck knows? And that's why I'd say to you, Kathy, is none of us know. The problem is that nobody is no one's trying to figure it out right now.
Yeah.
There's like 7 people who are getting to make original stuff right now.
Really?
And that's not enough, in my opinion. I want them all to keep making original stuff. I love Chris Nolan is making another movie. I like Chris Nolan movies. I don't love all of them, but I'm glad he gets to make another original movie, right? I think it's cool. Bill Lawrence is a guy who runs Ted Lasso, has 4 TV shows on the air right now. So everybody thinks, he's a genius.
Well, there's scripts out there, right? It's not that there's lack of writing, right?
Well, it's not that there's lack of writing, but there's lack of chutzpah,
willingness.
that they're going to take something new and try it, right? So you have certain things like horror. Horror seems to work in theaters. It gets enough people. You can make it cheaper. So now there's like a, Terrifier won the weekend in the box office. In all honesty, it's a super low budget slasher, bloody, weird horror. It's not good. It's not. but people like going to theaters. Teenagers, so as a certain time they they'll go to watch it together because people on their own have decided being scared is more fun with other people in the theater, right? My personal opinion is it's also because telling your mom or your wife or your friends or your father or your brother or your sister that you're going to watch a cheesy horror movie at home in the living room on Netflix is never going to happen, right? So if you can talk to your buddies from high school, let's go watch a scary movie, we can watch the feel good movie at home, right?
Mhm.
Like that's what I meant by the industry needs to share the data with people saying this is where we think, and we built it this way, right? So like if you do a big movie with big cameras, like you think, look, the best way to see this movie is IMAX. If you don't have an IMAX in your theater, first of all, write in and let's start petitioning to get an IMAX, right? But secondly,
The IMAX movie.
what?
I'm embarrassed to say it. I've never seen an IMAX movie.
Right, but that's not because you are against IMAX. You're like, I hate words that start with I. No, that isn't it. You didn't do it because there's not one close enough to see, and there's not a movie that you said, oh my God, if I don't see it in IMAX, I got to see it, right? And the truth of the matter is, I would tell you as a guy who's watched a ton in IMAX, it is better, but it's the kind of better that you happen to show up at the restaurant that had fresh fish versus the fish from 2 days ago. You're still going to eat the fish. You're still going to have the meat, right? I've even been in theaters that have an IMAX theater, but the timing of the IMAX show is bad for me, so I watch the standard show, right? I don't walk away feeling like I didn't see the movie, right? But the ones I really want to see, I go see it. But they need to do better at saying, it pretty much should have these reasons why you leave your living room. Like a friend of mine has a little theater in New Jersey, and I was telling him that we got to start an ad campaign that's sort of like, it's better than your living room. But
an experience. You got to describe an experience for people.
Yeah, and you got to figure out what matters. It doesn't seem to be just a good sound system and a bigger screen. That doesn't seem to be better than your living room because you're trading it off against the cost, the parking, the money, and the fact you might have a crazy asshole sitting next to you. Right?
And we have big screens at home now. TVs have come down.
But that's why I'm saying the business has to come to grips with pretty much all the movies I've done. I would argue you didn't have to see in a theater. What I would say about why they're theater worthy is Good Will Hunting is fun to watch with an audience because people cry, people have fun, people are into it, and the humor, everything comes across better when people are in the audience with you on a movie like that, right?
Yeah.
American Pie, 100%. There's jokes in American Pie. If you were watching with your family, you wouldn't laugh at all,
right?
If you were alone. But when you're in a dark room with 100 other people, you're gonna laugh. Right? And I think that's a big piece of what we owe to the audience to
is the experience. It's the experience.
Is we made it different, but it's also you got to appreciate. But then the theater owners also got, look, the seats are nice. We have, like I was saying to this guy who has a theater in Jersey, I said, the other thing you should do is you need enforcers of the rules, right? So like somebody needs to sit in the theater and have a little vest or a little flashlight. And like when the person's always on their phone, when the person's making noise, when the kids are fucking yelling at the screen. But you also should market it that way. Like I was saying, why not have a show at 9:30 at night when old guys like me aren't going to show up that says cell phones are allowed to be on, right? Like instead of my kids going down, I don't really want to go to the movie theater because I got to turn my phone off and then I'm going to miss this and what the party is later tonight. And I'm going to go here and there are boring parts and I want to follow the score in this game and blah, blah, blah. If you just say, okay, and all of their friends are doing that, so it doesn't bother them to have two screens going. All right, come to the theater and you can have your phone on, right? I mean, they do that in certain cities, have these like mom and nanny situations where they, where you're allowed to bring your kids and the kids run around the theater and that that's what's going to happen, but it's fun for your kids and you're okay with it, right? But
Jay would not be okay with it.
If it was in a separate thing and I knew that, that's fine. Yeah, that's perfect.
Right.
I would be the enforcer guy.
But he won't even let me sit by him at the movie theater because he thinks I'll talk too much.
But that's what I'm saying is they're putting it all together so that it's very difficult for them to right now make an argument why it's going to reliably be better.
I think they need better food. We need more than popcorn.
Yes, I agree. That's another.
If you can have dinner and watch your movie, and I know there's some of those out there, but
So, Chris, before we let you get out of here, is there anything else you want to promote that's coming up, either with Substack stuff or with Fusion, anything like that?
I mean, we're working on a couple movies. There's nothing to talk about now because there's nothing for anybody to go do.
Yeah.
What I would say is the Substack thing, One More Hollywood newsletter, is sort of replacing the podcast because we weren't doing anything that was super newsworthy. So making people tune in every week is tougher than just saying, hey, the information's here. If you're interested in any of the questions, and I'd love to link to this and just say, look, if you want to hear about movies and mental health, or Jay asked some great questions, and you can go listen to it. Or, Substack, which is the platform we chose to use, also has audio. So you can listen to me reading or saying my own letter. But the point is more, if you want to learn more about what's happening in the business, what my real goal is to try to help people figure out what they like so that when you get inundated with all the marketing and all the other stuff, you have some skills and some tools to know what you might like. Like, I'm going to call out Alan Bishop. He lives in Talbot County. I love Alan. He's a good guy. Loves movies. He likes to try to keep that a secret. I said to Alan, why is being a movie buff something
You should not be ashamed of that at all.
You guys in mental health work on Alan's self-confidence. But he says to me, I just love movies are so fun. You go there and things happen. He lists 2 or 3 movies that everyone in the world likes. He lists all these other things. And he goes, and I'll tell you, the one I stop on all the time that I can't believe it is Paul Blart.
Oh, we love Paul Blart.
Exactly. And my point is, there's people in my business who would say Paul Blart, and actually, if you take it bigger, all the Adam Sandler movies are stupid and not really well done. And yet Adam Sandler is one of the biggest stars in the world. And that's where I think the business is stupid.
Because we all have middle school boy humor at some level.
Right.
A lot of it.
And the point is, there's no reason to not say Paul Blart is a really funny, fun movie.
My kids watch. That's a go-to for my kids. Our family watches it.
Exactly. And that's what I was saying. Is in the world of cable, when you're clicking through.
Yeah, you stop on Paul Blart.
You stop on Paul Blart, right? Well, you don't have that anymore. Now you got to pick something off the menu.
Daddy's Home too. That was my last night stop. I love that movie.
That movie's great.
Over and over and over again.
Yeah. I think some of his early shit with Drew Barrymore, like Wedding Planner. Wedding
Oh,
Planner
God, yes.
is fucking great. Julia Gulia. But
You have to go ahead. I don't want to cut you off.
But that's what I'd say, Jay, is if you want to spend more time, the other thing about Substack is it has more interactive features, whereas podcast didn't as much. Was I'd love to hear people hear this, just like I love talking to you guys about it. People are really, how are you picking? What is happening out there, right? I live in a little bubble here with idiots in Hollywood or my family, and I know what they but if there was a way to communicate, because one of the things I think that the algorithms don't do is the algorithms can't know how your day was that day, right? And if they start asking you personal questions like, do you have a good day? Are you in a good mood? Well, then maybe you'd like Paul Blart, right? But for me, because I'm kind of dark, the other night, we were all in a mood and we watched Fight Club. Fight Club's not the same as Paul Blart, right? And it's a totally different mood thing. You can say they're both good movies, and sometimes you feel like one or feel like the other. My daughter loves romances, so we'll come home and watch all these things together if she wants to. But the point is, there's a mood factor and a personal factor, and we all somehow learn to figure that out with food, right? You could go home tonight and you could say to people, I feel like Italian. Do you have any fucking idea why you feel like Italian? Probably not. Are you going to spend any time analyzing why you like Italian? Probably not. And then if it's with somebody else, you're going to say, oh, we just had pasta, or I feel like whatever. And they're gonna say, all right, what do you want? And you're gonna, land on something that you both want, right? But you know how to be in that conversation. It's hard with movies. I mean, I can tell you, in television, I sit down with the menu with my wife, with one of my kids, with all 5 of us.
Oh,
We might spend a half hour looking at trailers and going through shit, trying to figure. Well, that half hour might have been most of the time we had to watch something. So now, basically, all we did was watch.
That is the most annoying thing, isn't it? And then we're all mad, and nobody's watching anything. It's for real. You know who he needs to talk? You know, we have to get on with you, Chris. Is Dylan, my youngest?
Yeah.
He's so interesting. He's getting ready to be 18, but he's all my kids are big consumers of content, but Dylan will tell you, like, there's times where he is in a mood and he is looking for a certain character, and he'll rewatch something because of that. Like, he has a different perspective as a youngin'.
But see, he's the example. He's 17, right? I got a 17-year-old son too, right? He's about to be 18. They grew up with all this choice.
Yeah.
So in some ways, they're the right guys to talk to. And I want to say guys because we both happen to have sons.
We have guys.
Women would have the same point of view. But that's why I'm saying Substack, I'm hoping to get some people who love movies. My other son has a friend in college who wrote this really good, in my opinion, newsletter himself, but then he went to college at UT and he stopped writing it. But I was like, Zach, you should still just come and tell me what you think, because he's 20, right? Ike doesn't want to be on it because it's his dad, but he's got 2 friends who love talking about it. I'd love to get Dylan into the Substack world and say, look, when you're in this mood, this framework, it's like what just happened with Alan and Paul Blart, right? I said it, you immediately smiled. I'm sure there are days you want to go home and fucking land on Paul Blart, right?
Oh, I could tell you so many segments of Paul Blart. I know I can recite it.
Right, and you just feel good. It's like
you wouldn't think that, right? I lead a mental health company. Why do I love Paul Blart? That's just weird, right? But I'll say it.
It makes you feel good.
American Joes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But Jason, that was very nice of you to give me that opportunity. I know
Yeah.
it doesn't make any sense, but if we could all get to the place where we knew more about what we liked, and part of that is also what can a theater offer that would actually make you in a mood where you feel like getting out of the house and going to a movie, right? As you said, maybe it's having a meal, right? I've been to some of those theaters. I hate having the waiters walking in front of me while the movie's playing. But it seems like today you should be able to order, have the food come, and that's good. What I think it also really is I think people need to be able to say the mood they're in, like sounds like Dylan, right? Yeah. And then have a resource to go to that is filed or whatever is categorized in moods, right? Instead of the menu that says comedy, action, thriller, if it just said,
interesting.
I feel like this, or now they do that sometimes when you pick one, it'll
nostalgic.
Say also watched, right? So like pick Paul Blart, you'll get 6 other movies that are like it, right? But you still have to pick first, and so I don't know what the solution is. I'm not a computer programmer, but it is my little quest besides getting to make some more movies is that if we, and I have a totally selfish motivation, which is if we could start to figure out what's more predictable, right? If I could say, listen, I'm making movies for this mood, right? And you sort of do that when you say comedy or romance or whatever, but it doesn't also say good or fresh or whatever. That it's a combination. I don't think anybody picks a movie or a television series based solely on one thing. I think it's usually 3 or 4. Who are you watching with? How much time do you have? What mood are you in? And it feels like an algorithm could answer some of those questions, And if people started hitting the button, which again is asking a lot of people, but if, multi-generational, 10 people, Thanksgiving, right?
Right.
Comedy, right? I personally, this is the last time my whole family, 18 people, went to a movie together, was when the first Knives Up came out.
That was good. Yeah.
That movie was funny. It's got some action. It's got some stuff. It's got some stars. It made everybody happy. Nobody was upset. And actually this summer we had that. A bunch of us went to see Inside Out 2. But it was a sequel, so we knew sort of what we were going into. But it's really hard if you're all trying to do something together in a holiday. You worry, like I certainly wouldn't ask all those people to watch Fight Club, right? I wouldn't necessarily ask them to watch American Pie because there's some stuff there that older folks, whatever, don't want to think about. And again, I'm just using those because I worked on them, but movies like that, right? And so I think that's another thing is if you want to make it a group experience, you got to make things that groups will go to, right? And right now, what happens, I bet, Kathy, with your family, it certainly happens with mine, is after 10 minutes of disagreeing with each other and everyone's a genius on what they don't want to watch,
Right.
Everybody breaks up and goes watch something on their laptop or in their
100%.
on their phone.
Yeah.
They don't even fucking bother because everything's available right there.
Yeah, and that's why I'm pissed. Yeah. And that's why I haven't watched Outer Banks yet. I'm like, I'm waiting for that group watch on Outer Banks, but somebody's got this, somebody's got that. I'm like,
Well, Chris,
Jay, my thing changed, so I'm happy to stay for a little while.
yep, you're
More
we're
questions?
certainly. Well, I was going to ask you. Oh, here's one real quick. So I've noticed as I've kind of started to catch back up on these series that have finally kind of slowly come back out after the strike, and I don't know if it's just me because kind of the apple the shine is off the apple because it's been so long. It just they didn't look the same. They didn't feel the same for a little bit. It took a few episodes to kind of get that feel again. So my question is, if a production has to stop mid-production, like how difficult is it to kind of, is it like a sports team that kind of takes a little while to kind of get back in the groove to kind of to kind of hit your stride when you start production back up again? And how does that kind of impact things? Not just from getting the people there schedule wise, because they may be contractually obligated for something else, but just once they're there, how does that affect, how can that affect the end product?
Well, it's interesting. I would say the term you're talking about is chemistry, right? And very specifically, most every scripted entertainment thing requires a certain amount of chemistry. If it's a bad guy and a good guy and they're playing cat and mouse, they play off each other. If it's a romance, clearly you need chemistry between the people falling in love. If it's a comedy, there's comedic chemistry. What can happen sometimes is the chemistry of what was happening the first time, right, doesn't come back because either, and this is just for the sake of being entertaining, the joke they always say is the chemistry can come from the two characters didn't sleep together and the chemistry did it, and in the off time they slept together, so you can never get back to the never slept together chemistry.
Yeah.
And that's just, I'm using an example, but the point is, the other thing that can happen, and this is kind of weird to admit, but the other thing that can happen is they watch it and they become self-conscious.
Yeah.
So like a lot of times the best thing is, and a lot of directors force this, a lot of directors will say, you can't watch the dailies, you can't watch it. But if you had a 5 month, or in this case, it was almost a year break because of the strikes and other stuff, you might have watched it, right? Or if it aired, right, you might not have watched it, but people in your circle watched it and commented, which is also gets in your head, right? Oh, that one blouse you were wearing was really ugly. So then you're like, you come back and you're like, I'm never wearing that blouse again. And you're like, okay, but it's worse. It's like, when you make that laugh, it's weird, that sound, right? Meanwhile, the director and everybody's saying, dude, when she laughs like that, it is funny as shit, right? Like, and those are generic answers. There's much more subtle answers, but some of that can affect what's happening. Every now and then, in between the coming back to it, one or two of the people became giant movie stars, television stars.
Are they dating a very famous person?
Right. So now they find it much harder to be this character because they're a part of an ensemble, right? So like George Clooney is an example of that on ER, right? They shut down. That wasn't because of strikes or anything, just shut down because the season was over and he starred in a movie. The movie was a giant hit, and all of a sudden he's George Clooney, right?
That was good.
And that's hard for George Clooney, but it's also hard for the other people. It's also hard for the marketing people because they want to, market that they got a giant movie star in their show, Also, George Clooney is getting offered millions of dollars. And again, I don't know anything about George Clooney. I'm just using an example for young kids. You're not going to know what ER was, but it was a very successful
Such a good show.
And there's a couple like that. Bruce Willis was on a show called Moonlighting.
Yeah.
And then he did
Sybil
Die
Shepherd.
Hard in between two series and became fucking Bruce Willis. It was harder to watch him on TV. Pierce Brosnan was on a show called Remington Steele. He was the star. He is Remington Steele. Still, he was James Bond. Now people are like, I'm not watching this show with sort of TV version of James Bond, right? Like, and it's not that they didn't want to do it. It's not that it just doesn't quite work anymore, right? And I think that's the biggest thing is it becomes like a bubble. You guys have probably been at parties or been in meetings or done an event or went camping, but sometimes shit becomes something that when you break it up, it's never going to come back to that. And part of the reason is because you have the expectation of what it was.
Yeah.
Right? So that's sitting in your head, and then you get there like, oh, it's not exactly the same. Or Jenny actually is kind of a bitch. Or, I don't understand. Or, you know what, this is bad for my career. I shouldn't be doing this anymore. Right. And, that's the kind of thing that as a producer, you're desperately trying not to have happen. In the things that I had the most sequels to, which would be American Pie, we were mostly just trying to get to another phase in life so that it wasn't the same. They weren't high school seniors anymore. They were college kids. They weren't college kids anymore. One guy was getting married, right? Then it was, now they're 10 years older and it's going to the high school reunion, right? So like, you're not really, you still want to get some of that chemistry, and they do it. Those guys can get right back into sort of the
Right.
stiflers in the gym and whatever, but they do much better at a different place and time than if we just came back and said, and this is the next day after the prom. You're like, wait a minute, like that's too hard. But it really depends. And then in other situations, it doesn't affect it at all. They can pick it right up and jump right into it and go do it. The other thing that can affect it is if the show becomes a hit. So like one of the ones that happened over this whole COVID and strike time was Slow Horses. I don't know if you watched that on Apple, but Slow Horses is sort of a darling right now. I personally like it. And it became a hit when they were shut down and weren't sure they were even getting to come back. And so now you're in a hit show, and they did renew it. Now they just renewed it for a 6th season, right?
Oh, wow.
It's on Apple, and none of those people in it thought they were doing 6 seasons, but they also love that it's a hit. So there's a lot of shit that just when you change it, it changes the dynamic. And I'm sure you've had vacations with people where you're like, man, when we were in that house on that lake for that week, it was fucking unbelievable. And you could go back to that house on that lake on the same fucking 6 days of the next year, and it won't be unbelievable.
So if we go back to 13th Street on the boardwalk, it won't be the same.
It won't be. I think about that often.
Well, Chris, we really appreciate you coming back and giving us some more time and try to make something that is a little bit more what we wanted to do. So yeah, we appreciate you coming back.
But open invitation.
I'm
Open
always
invitation.
available to you guys, and I hope I see you when I show up down
Oh,
there.
absolutely.
And
We'll be there.
and again, I think it's great you guys are doing it, and I think it sounds probably random the first time people hear it, but the combination of mental health and storytelling, in my opinion, is a really good one.
Yeah. Well, guys, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Take care, guys.